What started as a dream modeling opportunity in Milan became a 7-year nightmare that would expose one of Europe's most sophisticated human trafficking operations. A young German woman's desperate escape would ultimately save hundreds of lives and bring down an international criminal network that had operated in plain sight for nearly a decade. Welcome to True Crime Family Corner, where we dive deep into the most shocking cases that reveal the dark side of human nature. I'm your host, and today we're exploring a case that will leave you questioning how predators can hide behind the glittering facade of the fashion industry. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and please watch until the end as this story takes turns you won't expect. Spring had just arrived in Hamburg, Germany in 1997 when 19-year-old Sophia Weber made a decision that would change her life forever. Living in a cramped student apartment and working part-time at a clothing store to pay for university, Sophia often felt trapped by her ordinary life. At 5 feet 9 inches tall with natural blonde hair and striking green eyes, she'd always been told she had the perfect look for modeling. That ordinary Tuesday afternoon, as Sophia sat in her favorite cafe near the university, nursing a coffee and reviewing her economics textbook, fate seemed to intervene. A well-dressed man approached her table with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Excuse me," he said in accented English, his Italian pronunciation adding an exotic charm to his words. "I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I couldn't help noticing you from across the room." The stranger introduced himself as Alessandro Rossetti, a talent scout for Milano elite models. Everything about him screamed success and sophistication. His charcoal gray suit was perfectly tailored, his leather shoes gleamed under the cafe lights, and an expensive gold watch caught the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. He moved with the easy grace of someone who belonged in Italy's fashion capitals. "You have exactly the qualities our agency seeks," Alessandro continued, placing an elegant business card on the table between them. The heavy cardstock felt expensive in Emma's trembling fingers, and the embossed gold logo of Milano elite models seemed to promise everything she'd ever dreamed of. Alessandro painted a picture that seemed too good to be true. He spoke of working with legendary fashion houses like Versace and Armani, of international campaigns that would take her around the world, of lucrative contracts that would set her up for life. But what impressed him most, he claimed, wasn't just her physical beauty. "It's that natural energy you possess," he said, his dark eyes studying her face intently. "That authentic quality that can't be taught or faked. It's something you're either born with or you're not, and you have it." What Sophia couldn't have known was that Alessandro had been watching her for 3 days. He knew her class schedule, knew she lived alone, knew her parents lived in a small town hours away. Most importantly, he knew she was vulnerable, dreamy, and desperate for something more than her mundane student life. At 42, Alessandro Rossetti had spent over a decade perfecting his recruitment technique. His method was devastatingly simple yet effective. He targeted young women during transitional periods in their lives, college students, recent graduates, anyone dealing with relationship problems or financial struggles. The ideal victim was always the same: attractive enough to believe they could be models, but not connected enough in the fashion world to recognize the warning signs. Over the following days, Alessandro bombarded Sophia with attention and promises. He called her daily, sent beautiful flower arrangements to her apartment, and took her to expensive restaurants where he regaled her with fascinating stories about the glamorous world of high fashion. He showed her photographs of his other discoveries, beautiful young women who now graced magazine covers and walked runways in Paris and New York. The isolation began gradually, but systematically. Alessandro always found reasons why Sophia should spend her time with him instead of her friends. He convinced her that preparing for Milan required total focus and dedication. "Successful models can't afford distractions," he explained during one of their dinners. "Complicated relationships, demanding part-time jobs, time-consuming studies. All of that has to take a back seat if you're serious about this opportunity." Don't forget to subscribe if you're finding this story as disturbing as I am. We're just getting started. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Alessandro made his official offer: a modeling contract in Milan, complete with accommodation in a professional model house and immediate work opportunities. The only catch was that Sophia had to decide quickly. A spot had just opened up, and the flight was scheduled for the following Monday. The conversation with her parents was heartbreaking. Through tears and desperate pleas, they begged her to reconsider. Something about Alessandro didn't feel right to them, they said. The whole situation seemed too good to be true. But Sophia's mind was made up. She was 19, legally an adult, and this was her chance to escape the ordinary life that felt like a prison. As she packed her belongings that final weekend, Sophia had no idea she was about to begin 7 years of hell that would traumatize her forever. The flight from Hamburg to Milan lasted just 2 hours, but to Sophia it felt like an eternity. She pressed her face against the airplane window, watching the familiar German countryside give way to the snow-capped Alps, and then the rolling Italian landscape. Alessandro sat beside her, occasionally pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about Milan's fashion district. But as their taxi wound through the city streets after landing, Sophia noticed they were traveling away from the glamorous areas Alessandro had described. The buildings became older and less maintained, the streets narrower and filled with locals rather than tourists. "Don't worry," Alessandro said, as if reading her growing concern. "The model house is in an authentic neighborhood, away from the tourist areas. The girls prefer it that way, more privacy and quiet to focus on their work." The apartment building had no elevator, and they climbed 3 flights of worn marble stairs before Alessandro produced a heavy set of keys. The apartment itself was larger than Sophia's Hamburg flat, but there was something deeply unsettling about the atmosphere. The lighting was dim, the furniture looked tired, and most disturbing of all were the other girls. Sophia counted 6 young women, all roughly her age, all possessing the kind of beauty that would turn heads on any street. But their eyes told a different story. They looked hollow, defeated, as if they were waiting for something that would never come. That first evening, Alessandro gathered all the girls in the living room for what he called an orientation meeting. His demeanor had shifted subtly since their arrival. The charming Italian gentleman from Hamburg was still there, but underneath Emma detected something harder, more controlling. "The rules here are simple," he began, his voice carrying a new authority. "You are here to become professional models, and that requires discipline, dedication, and complete trust in me and the agency." The first rule made Sophia's stomach drop. Alessandro would be keeping all their passports for safety reasons. Milan could be dangerous for tourists, he explained, and they were too valuable as investments for the agency to take any risks. Sophia hesitated, her passport feeling heavy in her hands. Giving it up seemed like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But Alessandro's explanation sounded reasonable, and the other girls had already handed theirs over without protest. The daily routine began immediately. Early morning exercise sessions, dietary restrictions to maintain their figures, and photography sessions that seemed more focused on intimate poses than professional portfolio material. When Sophia asked about actual modeling jobs, castings, or client meetings, Alessandro always had an excuse. "You're not ready yet," he would say with a patient smile. "You need more training. The market is particularly challenging right now, but amazing opportunities are coming soon." Food was strictly controlled and rationed. The girls were told that the fashion industry demanded extreme thinness, and their diets were carefully monitored to ensure they maintained the proper weight. Sophia found herself constantly hungry, her clothes growing looser by the week. Communication with the outside world was severely limited. The apartment's phone was often temporarily disconnected due to technical problems, and when it did work, all calls were supervised. When Sophia finally managed to call her parents, Alessandro stood beside her the entire time, his intense gaze serving as a constant reminder of the communication guidelines he'd established. She heard herself telling her parents that everything was wonderful, that the opportunities were amazing, that she was learning so much about the fashion industry. But inside, doubt was beginning to gnaw at her. The financial trap revealed itself slowly. Alessandro presented Sophia with an itemized bill for services rendered, photography sessions, professional training, accommodation, meals. The total exceeded 6,000 German marks, a fortune for a college student. "Don't worry," he said, seeing the shock on her face. "This is how the industry operates. You'll pay it back with your first major contracts, but until then, you owe the agency. It's a relationship built on mutual trust." Sophia felt her world tilting. She didn't have 6,000 marks. Neither did her parents. For the first time, real fear began to creep into her consciousness. It was another girl, Katerina from Russia, who finally told Sophia the truth. During a whispered conversation in the bathroom, one of the few places where they might have a moment of privacy, Katerina revealed the horrifying reality of their situation. "There are no modeling jobs," she said, her voice barely audible. "There never were. The photo sessions, the training, it's all fake. He makes money from us in other ways, and the debt just keeps growing." Sophia felt nausea rise in her throat. But what about the advertising campaigns? The contracts he promised? Katerina shook her head sadly. "Fantasy. He always has excuses. The market is tough. You need more training. Clients want something different. Meanwhile, the debt grows with every day we stay here. Food, accommodation, opportunity fees he invents. I now owe more than 15,000 marks. How can I ever pay that back without doing what he wants?" Though what he wants didn't need to be spelled out. Sophia understood with horrifying clarity what kind of work Alessandro expected them to do to pay off their impossible debts. If this story is shocking you as much as it's shocking me, please hit that subscribe button. We're about to dive into how this nightmare escalated even further. Alessandro's psychological manipulation was masterful and systematic. He alternated between disappointed father figure and understanding mentor, always dangling the promise of legitimate modeling work just out of reach. A real job was always coming next week. An important client had specifically asked about her. A unique opportunity was on the horizon. The apartment was under constant surveillance. Alessandro seemed to know details of private conversations that could only have been obtained through electronic monitoring. After Sophia's whispered conversation with Katerina, he confronted her within hours. "I hear you've been questioning our program," he said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "That's concerning to me. Doubt creates negative energy, and it affects the entire group." As summer progressed, the true nature of the operation became undeniable. This was not a modeling agency. It was a sophisticated human trafficking operation disguised as a professional opportunity, and Alessandro had built his empire on his accurate reading of human psychology. He recognized the signs of growing resistance in Sophia with the expertise of someone who had manipulated hundreds of women over the years. The carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack, and Alessandro was preparing to reveal the full extent of his power. Everything began to fall apart on a sweltering July morning. Sophia had discovered an old cell phone left behind by one of Alessandro's clients and managed to hide it for 3 days. During the early morning hours, while the other girls slept in exhaustion, she desperately tried to make calls home. But Alessandro's network was more extensive than she had imagined. Within hours of her attempted phone calls, he appeared at her bedside with a folder of legal documents. "Remember those papers you signed on your first day?" he asked, his voice deadly calm. They weren't just agency formalities. Sophia stared at the contracts she vaguely remembered signing, documents she had interpreted as standard modeling agreements. Reading more carefully now, she saw clauses about debt repayment, work obligations, and penalties for breach of contract. Under Italian law, Alessandro lied with convincing authority. "You are legally obligated to work for me until your debt is fully paid. And if you try to leave before that happens, I can have you arrested for theft of services." To emphasize his point, he brought Sophia face to face with Petra, another girl who had once been housed in their apartment. Petra's transformation was shocking. Her once bright eyes were now glazed and lifeless, her spirit completely broken. Petra tried to be difficult too, Alessandro explained with chilling calmness. "Now she works at one of our other establishments. The conditions there are far less comfortable. The girls work 12-hour shifts 7 days a week. No private rooms, no privileges, no hope of negotiating their debts." Petra looked directly at Sophia, her lips moving almost imperceptibly. "Don't try to escape," she whispered. "It's worse. Much worse." The message was crystal clear: cooperation or devastating consequences. Alessandro's operation was more sophisticated than Emma had imagined. He had connections everywhere: corrupt officials, falsified documents, police officers who ignored complaints in exchange for bribes. The system was designed to be escape-proof. "The beauty of the system," Emma overheard Alessandro explaining to a visitor, "is that the girls control each other. They see what happens to those who rebel. They understand that cooperation is the only path to survival. It's far more efficient than direct violence. But when Sofia made another attempt to contact the outside world, this time by writing a desperate letter and trying to convince a delivery man to post it, Alessandro's patience finally ran out. She could see the change in his eyes, a cold fury that promised retribution. The war between predator and prey was about to enter its most brutal phase. Sofia's opportunity for escape came from an unexpected source: Alessandro's own arrogance. After months of total control over the girls' lives, he had become overconfident in what he believed was a foolproof system. It was this arrogance that would create the first real crack in his operation. The opportunity presented itself when Alessandro arranged for Sofia to meet a wealthy potential client named Heinrich Richter, a German businessman who was interested in exclusive arrangements with young models. Alessandro saw this as a chance for significant profit and wanted Sofia to appear healthy and willing to the client. For the first time in months, Sofia was allowed to bathe in privacy and dress in nice clothing. But Alessandro underestimated her intelligence and desperation. She immediately realized this might be her only real chance at escape, and she began planning meticulously. During preparations for the meeting with Richter, Sofia gained temporary access to areas of the apartment normally off-limits to the girls, including Alessandro's office. It was there that she discovered the true scope of the operation: detailed records of hundreds of victims, financial documents showing enormous profits, and most importantly, contact information for various officials and clients. When Richter arrived, Sofia delivered the performance of her life. She acted like a cooperative young woman, even displaying what seemed like enthusiasm about the international opportunities being offered. Both Richter and Alessandro were satisfied with her apparent compliance, and everyone's guard was lowered. During a moment of celebration between the two men, as they drank champagne and discussed contract details, Sofia executed her plan. She managed to secretly activate Alessandro's recording device and position it to capture their conversation, including Richter's detailed description of what he expected from Sofia and Alessandro's confirmation of the true nature of their business arrangement. But Sofia's real breakthrough came when she discovered Alessandro's backup recording system. She had noticed that he always carried his most important tapes in a briefcase, but occasionally left copies hidden in his office. She managed to locate not only the tape of Richter's visit, but also, incredibly, a phone number that appeared on Alessandro's papers, apparently an Italian investigator who was being monitored by the organization. With her heart pounding so hard she thought it might give her away, Sofia dialed the number. By incredible luck, it was indeed Detective Commissioner Antonio Bersani with the Italian National Police, who had been investigating reports of missing young women from across Europe. The conversation was brief and terrifying. Sofia managed to provide her location, explain the situation, and promised to get the incriminating recordings to the authorities. What she didn't know was that Commissioner Bersani had already been organizing a coordinated international operation, and her call provided the final pieces of evidence they needed. For 3 agonizing days, Sofia maintained the appearance of normalcy while waiting for police intervention. But on the morning of the 4th day, she woke to find Alessandro standing at the foot of her bed, his face twisted with fury. He had discovered that someone had violated his private office, and his suspicion had immediately fallen on Sofia. The final confrontation was about to begin. Please subscribe if you want to see how this incredible story ends, because what happens next will shock you. But what Alessandro didn't know was that his empire was already crumbling around him. Commissioner Bersani had spent the previous 4 days coordinating not just a rescue operation, but a massive international investigation spanning multiple countries and law enforcement agencies. The tape Sofia had provided was the key that unlocked investigations across 6 different nations. Similar operations were being planned simultaneously in Germany, Switzerland, France, Austria, and the Netherlands. The scope of Alessandro's network was far larger than anyone had initially suspected. When the raid finally came, it was executed with military precision. Italian special forces, working with international partners, surrounded the building at dawn. The exits were blocked, communications were intercepted, and agents specializing in human trafficking crimes knew exactly what evidence to look for. The most shocking discovery came when investigators found a hidden basement beneath the apartment building. 5 additional girls were imprisoned there in conditions far worse than those in the main apartment. These were the ones who had caused too much trouble, locked in makeshift cells, some for weeks at a time, fed only scraps of food, and used as examples to keep the others in line. Alessandro's office yielded a treasure trove of evidence that exceeded investigators' expectations. They found more than 200 confiscated passports from victims across multiple continents, fraudulent contracts written in 12 different languages, professional surveillance equipment, and enormous amounts of cash in various currencies. Even more devastating was the discovery that Alessandro had been operating his network for at least 8 years. Conservative estimates suggested that more than 300 young women had passed through his system during that time. In the months following the raids, the true complexity of the case emerged. The investigation revealed connections to organized crime families, corruption networks reaching high levels of government, and financial systems designed to launder profits from human trafficking across international borders. Alessandro Rossetti was arrested and eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. However, the justice system's response felt inadequate given the scope of his crimes. Many of his associates escaped prosecution due to corruption and jurisdictional complications. The money he had invested in properties under false names was never fully recovered, and the victims never received adequate compensation for their years of trauma. The aftermath was devastating for many of the survivors. Katerina, the Russian girl who had first told Sofia the truth, never fully recovered from her ordeal. She returned to Russia, but her family rejected her because of the social stigma surrounding her experience. Years later, Sofia learned that Katerina had become addicted to drugs and was living on the streets of St. Petersburg. Other girls faced similar tragic fates. Some were never able to reintegrate into normal society, carrying the psychological scars of their captivity for the rest of their lives. Sofia returned to Germany forever changed. The bright, optimistic young woman who had dreamed of modeling careers was gone, replaced by someone who understood the darkest capabilities of human manipulation. She spent years in therapy, struggling to rebuild her sense of trust and safety in the world. But Sofia's courage in that Milan apartment had saved countless other potential victims. The investigation her evidence triggered led to the dismantling of similar operations across Europe and the rescue of dozens of other young women who might otherwise have disappeared forever. During Alessandro's trial, the full extent of his systematic documentation became clear. He had kept detailed records of hundreds of victims, treating their exploitation as a business to be optimized and their suffering as data to be analyzed. He had photographed, filmed, and cataloged years of human trafficking with the cold efficiency of a corporate executive. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that he had operated with the knowledge and protection of corrupt officials in multiple countries. The investigation exposed a network of corruption that reached into high levels of government in at least 3 nations, though many of those officials were never prosecuted. Today, Sofia carries the knowledge of how many others were not as fortunate as she was. How many dreams were destroyed by predators like Alessandro Rossetti, who hide behind legitimate-seeming opportunities. The justice she helped achieve was partial and incomplete, as it always is in cases of such complexity. But sometimes partial justice is enough to make the difference between life and death, between hope and total despair. Sofia's story stands as a testament to the power of human courage in the face of unimaginable evil, and a warning about how easily dreams can be weaponized by those who prey on the vulnerable. The modeling industry, like many others that promise fame and fortune to young people, continues to grapple with how to protect aspiring models from similar predatory schemes. Sofia's case led to stronger international cooperation in investigating human trafficking and new protections for young people seeking careers in fashion and entertainment. Her nightmare lasted 7 years, but her courage in fighting back saved hundreds of other lives. That's the kind of story we tell here at True Crime Family Corner. Stories that matter, that reveal both the darkness humans are capable of and the light that can emerge from the most desperate situations. Thank you for watching until the end. If Sofia's story has moved you or opened your eyes to the realities of human trafficking, please share this video to help spread awareness. Subscribe to True Crime Family Corner for more stories that expose the truth behind society's most shocking crimes. And remember, sometimes the most ordinary moments can change everything.